The entire hospital floor had fallen into an uneasy silence. Doctors had exhausted every treatment they could offer. Nurses had done everything within their power, and specialists had traveled from across the state of Montana hoping to help the legendary Army Ranger whose body was slowly giving up after years of sacrifice. Yet every attempt ended the same way. The wounded veteran refused to cooperate, turned away every caregiver, and stared blankly at the ceiling as if he had already made peace with death. Then, on one ordinary afternoon, an elderly hospital janitor quietly pushed open the door with nothing more than a mop and a bucket. The moment the ranger saw him, his tired eyes widened. His back straightened despite the pain. His trembling hand rose into a perfect salute. Everyone watching froze in disbelief because something impossible had just happened. Before we continue this unforgettable story, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to the channel if you believe kindness, loyalty, and second chances can change a person's life forever. The story began in Billings, Montana, where 54-year-old Army Ranger Captain Matthew Carter had been admitted after years of hidden injuries finally overwhelmed his body. Multiple overseas deployments, countless rescue missions, and untreated trauma had left his organs failing. The nation's heroes had honored him with medals, ceremonies, and speeches, but none of those honors eased the lonely nights inside a quiet hospital room. Matthew had lost his wife several years earlier, had no children, and had pushed away nearly everyone who cared about him because he believed no one should watch a soldier slowly fade away. Every nurse entered his room with compassion and left carrying disappointment. He barely spoke, refused medication at times, and ignored every attempt to comfort him. The hospital staff began to believe that his greatest wound was not physical but hidden deep inside his heart. Working silently in the same hospital was 72-year-old janitor Thomas Walker, a humble Christian man who greeted everyone with a gentle smile. Most employees knew almost nothing about him except that he never missed a shift and often stayed late cleaning rooms no one else wanted. He wore old work boots, carried himself with quiet dignity, and spent every lunch break reading a small, worn Bible in the hospital chapel. To most people, Thomas was simply part of the background. Few realized that decades earlier he had served as a ranger instructor before leaving the military after a devastating training accident claimed the lives of several young soldiers under his command. The tragedy haunted him for years, and instead of seeking recognition, he chose a simple life devoted to serving others in silence. One rainy afternoon, Thomas received instructions to clean an empty room, but a scheduling mistake brought him outside Captain Carter's room instead. As he gently opened the door with his cleaning cart, Matthew immediately recognized the faded ranger shoulder patch that Thomas still quietly kept stitched inside his old work jacket. In an instant, something long buried awakened inside the dying soldier. His military discipline returned. Despite overwhelming pain, he struggled upright and offered the strongest salute his weakened body could manage. Nurses standing nearby stared in amazement because this was the first voluntary movement Matthew had made in days. Thomas slowly returned the salute, not as a janitor but as a fellow ranger who understood the weight carried by every soldier who survived while friends did not. He walked to the bedside without judgment or pity. He simply looked into Matthew's tired eyes with the understanding that only someone who had endured similar battles could possess. Nothing dramatic happened in that moment. No miracle cured the illness. Instead, the room filled with something far more powerful than medicine. It filled with respect, shared sacrifice, and the silent promise that no ranger should ever fight alone. Over the following days, Thomas finished his cleaning duties before spending a few quiet minutes with Matthew every evening. They never spoke much about war. Instead, they remembered fishing trips in Montana, peaceful mountain sunrises, church bells on Sunday mornings, and the ordinary moments that soldiers often miss while protecting strangers. Slowly, Matthew began accepting his medication again. He thanked nurses for their care, smiled at hospital staff, and even allowed the hospital chaplain to pray beside his bed. The doctors noticed remarkable emotional improvement. Although they knew his illness could not be reversed, they also saw that hope had returned where despair had once lived. The nurses eventually learned Thomas's forgotten military history and finally understood why the ranger had trusted him so completely. Yet Thomas never accepted praise. He insisted he had done nothing extraordinary. He simply remembered the promise every ranger made to never leave another behind. whether on a battlefield or inside a quiet hospital room. His humble words spread through the hospital, inspiring employees who had grown exhausted by heartbreak to continue serving every patient with renewed compassion. As the weeks passed, Matthew requested something no one expected. He asked to be taken outside into the hospital garden one final time. There, beneath the clear Montana sky, surrounded by nurses, doctors, veterans, and Thomas, he spoke about forgiveness instead of regret. He thanked every caregiver he had once refused. He admitted that fear had convinced him he deserved to die alone. But one humble janitor reminded him that true strength is found in accepting kindness, not rejecting it. Tears flowed freely among everyone present because they witnessed a man who had finally found peace. A few days later, Captain Matthew Carter passed away quietly with Thomas sitting beside him, holding his hand and softly reading Psalm 23. The hospital held a memorial service unlike any before. Doctors stood beside janitors. Nurses stood beside veterans. Everyone realized that greatness is not measured by titles, uniforms, or wealth, but by the compassion we show another human being when they need it most. Thomas returned to work the following morning with the same mop, the same bucket, and the same humble smile, proving that true heroes often wear uniforms the world never notices. If this story touched your heart, please support the channel by liking this video, sharing it with friends and family, subscribing, and telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories of hope reach more people who may need them today. Special request. Before this story ends, please leave a comment with the words, "No one fights alone," if you believe every act of kindness can change someone's life. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not saving a life but reminding someone that they were never forgotten. And in one quiet hospital room in the United States, a humble janitor proved that honor, faith, and compassion can reach places that medicine alone never could.